we hear from the CLT network. And it is my great pleasure today to introduce Professor Denise Poumane. She needs no introductions because she is very well known, both in the field, but also within the ACLT communities. She's a ACLT fellow. She's emeritus professor at Sorbonne. She is a grant holder, ERC grant holder. So I could go on forever, but then rather than doing this, I rather give the floor directly to Denise. Thanking, I'm really grateful to you to have been accepting this invitation, and the floor is yours. Please, Denise.
Thank you very much, Achille. First of all, I convey my warmest greetings to ECLT members and to the audience. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few geographical insights with the audience today. I'm delighted to speak about the geographical co-evolution of cities. And I will make a short presentation, and will be happy to answer your questions afterwards. What I want to discuss today, and apologies for people who already saw this type of slides. The questions we had were about providing a scientific explanation to urban growth. Because when discussing with stakeholders, many of them in the 60s, when French and Italian cities were booming, most of them were explaining the growth of their city through the smartness of their policy, either for attracting firms or building housing for attracting migrants, and so on. But when we started collecting data and making detailed statistical observation of thousands of cities and their evolution over centuries, we discovered that the main law of this evolution was a quasi-equal probability for each city to grow like the other cities of the territory she belongs to. And then we called that a distributed growth on the long run, with, of course, many local and temporal fluctuations. And I was happy to discover in a book by Robson, published in '73, that a good model for describing this was from a French statistician called Gibrat, whom you know, I am sure. And his law of proportional growth demonstrated that if a city grow with similar growth rates that are not correlated with the city size and not with previous growth, you get at the end a statistical distribution of the size of cities, which is a log normal, rather similar to the Zipf distribution or the Simon observations. And we are happy with this very simple model because it enables explaining the persistency of urban spatial patterns and hierarchies, as well as this general statistical shape that we can observe in urban systems all over the world. And if I show you these maps as an example of the persistency of what we call urban hierarchies, meaning the differentiation between cities because of their population size, which is represented here, as you see, by circles that are whose size is proportional to the population, over more than one century, where, I remind you, occurred small events like the first industrial revolution, like 2 world wars, and the recovery after the Second World War. You see that the main centers in this distribution remained at the same place. They are still very large compared to the rest of the urban system. And then you can have the impression of a quasi-homothetic development of cities in the territory of Europe. And if you look at India, which is a much more populated continent, you see that the evolution is exactly the same over 1 century of observation. Of course, things would be a little different if we went back in the medieval times, where the most important cities in India were located inside the continent and not on as harbors on the coast. Anyway, for a long period of time, the distribution of urban hierarchies remain not exactly stationary, because the population is growing very much, but the cities in the highest position remain for a long time at the same place, and the statistical shape of the distribution is also comparable in all countries we have observed, with this zip representation of the population against the number of cities of different size, of higher size. And you see that for the BRICS, as well as Europe or former Soviet Union, we keep this very interesting and striking for physicists, for instance, considering that it is strange that in a system you have 4 orders of magnitude with objects designed with the same word, a city. So from that, we already can transmit in for the layman and for urban stakeholders a knowledge which makes sense. That is the predictability of city growth and size for a few decades at least. The largest metropolises are in agreement with the general distribution of city size. They are not monsters. And of course, this is a very complex result, because we know that meanwhile, all individual stakeholders, whatever are they, public administrations or private firms or individual citizens, they have all adaptive strategies for ensuring the better production or conditions of living and so on in the urban systems. And there is a rivalry, a competition, but which is also made of complementarities and emulation. So the specialists of complex systems speak of cooperation and competition between cities. And as a result, we have a very high robustness of those systems of cities. Of course, it is not a norm, not an optimum, because it acknowledges significant variations across the different countries and regions of the world. But nevertheless, and perhaps this is the reason, those systems have in their co-evolution a very high coherence and continuity, as we can see here on the example of Europe. When, as Céline Rosenblatt did, you simply measure the distance, the Euclidean distance between cities in Europe, and you connect all of them that are distant from less than 25 kilometers. You get this image, which clearly divide Europe into three regions. The French and Spain territories that were centralized a very long time ago, centuries ago, since the Middle Age, and they have contrasted pattern with regions of high density of cities and voids in the territory. In the middle of Europe, of the continent, where you have countries that were unified later on, mainly Germany and Italy in the 19th century. So cities remained for a very longer time, many centuries, in a rivalry for their development because the government was restricted to much smaller territories around cities than nowadays. And there is a much higher density of cities. Cities are here defined as urban agglomerations larger than 10,000 inhabitants. In the eastern part of Europe, the urbanization was a process that developed much later, around the 13th century. There was still a forest in this part of land between the major circulation axes in Western Europe and Russia. And this development was made mostly by religious congregations, and they planned the development in a much more regular way, which is still visible nowadays in the spacing, regular spacing between cities. And this pattern between cities, you still observe it if you enlarge your stick from 25 kilometers to between 25 and 50. You recognize as well the three large regions. And if you raise the level of observation of city size to 100,000 inhabitants, and the stick of 100 or 150 kilometers, you see that the consistency of the spatial organization of the urban system remain exactly with the same type of style of urban settlement. So this inscription in the territorial patterns of urban hierarchy of the mode of governance which were operational for centuries ago is really remarkable and is a demonstration of the persistency, the past dependency of interurban interactions that ensure the development, the coherent development of city systems over time. And this coherence, we were very surprised with Thérèse Saint-Julien in the 70s, all time ago. This is an icon of our first book on comparison of socio-economic structures of French cities. This is two factors of a multivariate analysis of the socio-economic profiles. And we made this analysis on the same cities observed at different points in time, here between 54 and 75, the censuses, French censuses. And fortunately, the categories of employment remained the same during that period. And what was striking on this image is that many cities follow the same direction of transformation between the initial date and the final. The parallelism of the trajectories, whatever for very industrialized cities specialized in metallurgy, textile, or for cities with very little blue-collar workers, but more tertiary activities, they followed the same direction of transformation over this period of some 30 years. And this was verified later on by Fabien Paulus on French cities again between 1960 and 2000. And the transformations were also parallel in the socio-economic structure, involving more tertiary activities and more modern services and disappearance or diminution of manufacturing. And in this movement, in this general movement, a city like Paris, who already had a structure, a socio-economic structure in advance compared to the other big cities in France, kept this advance during that evolution. This was also verified, for instance, on the evolution of North American cities, which have grown according to a very different pattern because of the colonization, progressive colonization of the country before until 19th century. But you see that now their evolution follow exactly the same type, demonstrating a rigorous co-evolution. And this exercise also led us to discover an interpretation of urban change which correspond to big transformation of cities which happen sometimes because of a type of innovation which is of the disruptive kind and selective in terms of location. And this is the case, of course, for the first industrial revolution that happened in the US, mainly in the region of the Great Lakes. Whereas the other parts of the country were not attained by this big manufacturing development. And still today, so 1 century after, the major differentiation between the societies, the skills, the professions, and the economic activity of cities is a trace of this first big transformation of the economic structure of North American cities, with a specialization of in retail trade, services, construction, in the other cities in orange and yellow color here. Of course, there are changes happening. For instance, when we see the second differentiation between the structure of activity of those American cities, which, as in France, as in Italy, make a distinction between cities that have modern tertiary economic structures with finance, insurance, and business services, for instance, much more developed in orange and yellow here, compared to cities that have kept more of the ancient economy, food industry, wood and paper, private household services, and so on. You see that the usual pattern of diffusion of those activities in cities, when you don't have heavy location factor, like in the case of industrial revolution, which follow coal and iron mining and heavy transportation means. So in that case, the diffusion of innovations distinguish the largest cities which adapt much quicker to the transformation, whereas the smallest cities, because the size of the circle here is proportional to the number of employment in each city, you see that the smallest remain far backward compared to what happens in the largest city. So we you see, starting with a simple statistic analysis of the evolution of economic structure, we discovered a dynamic process of this co-evolution, which is an interactive adaptation of cities with feedbacks to the innovations they have created, because of course, as David Lane knows very well, most innovations appear in cities and in large cities. So now, with this complement to the theory, we can explain the systematic deviations we had observed compared to the simple statistical and stochastic model by Gibrat, where interactions are not taken into account. We also can explain the emerging property of systems of cities that are both the hierarchy and functional diversity, and even look at the bifurcation in individual urban trajectories linked with their adoption of innovation. So we have summarized that in this geographic ontology of urban system, distinguishing 3 levels of observation from individuals and firms to the meso level of the city, which correspond to 1 hour distance, mainly in time between the center and the periphery, whatever the observation period. The system of cities, which has also different emerging properties, hierarchy and functional diversity of cities, a special pattern I show you. Whereas inside cities, you have collective emerging properties, centrality, functions, morphology, even the more subjective ambiance urbaine, combining objective and subjective features of the way you what you feel, what you resent in a city. And this, of course, belongs to the collective organization only, and not to the individuals that compose them, where we usually use a diversity of other indicators to characterize individuals. So we imagine that these emerging properties are constructed by the many interactions of different kinds, I will not detail, that are occurring inside cities, on building cities, between cities. And we, of course, have many studies trying to compare the pattern of interaction with the emerging properties. We also can better understand the bifurcations that we can observe when comparing the evolution of one single city, PI, with the evolution of the entire system to which it belongs, the PU population, over a different period of time. Sorry, the data of the bifurcations are missing here, but of course you can observe the development of a big harbor with the colonial times in Marseille until this function decreased with the independence of North African countries mainly, and which is now trying to recover through politic of cultural European cultural cities, or redeveloping other types of activity. Cities in the shadow of the Paris region have usually this type of trajectory of a relative decline, because their development was hampered by one of the biggest cities in close vicinity. You can see the different stage of development of a port in South Africa, like Durban. In Port Elizabeth, you have this reversal in the development because of the motor industry. Detroit is another example of the heavy weight of the automobile industry on the development of cities, while Dallas, as a city of the petrol, is still growing. So we imagine, to summarize this type of general trajectory, cities being constantly stimulated by a flow of innovations that oblige them to adapt. They may enter a virtuous growth circle and become a metropole if adapting to each of these innovations and having a good attractivity and good image. But even if they by accident specialize too much in one of those innovations, they keep for a while a good image because they have a very precise skill which is recognized, but this may enter them into a cycle of decline where you find the cities of ghost towns, Rust Belt, and so on. And sometimes they may restructure again and tackle again with innovations. So the idea afterwards was to try to test if we were able to reconstruct those urban trajectories using simulation models, and we choose multi-agent systems for their flexibility, enabling to represent in a computer system a variety of spatial interactions. And we developed this series of SimPop models, which was in the first time very much constrained by the capacity of computing systems. What we could check with this first application presented in Geographical Analysis in '96 was that there was no emergence of an urban hierarchy if you don't take care of spatial interactions within the system. You could start with initial condition completely homogeneous, but develop a polycentric and hierarchized system of cities. But provided that you have a constant innovation flow for maintaining the structural properties of the system of cities. We were not sure, because of the restricted capacity of computers at the time, to ensure that the parameters we have estimated were really relevant. And because there is little information about interactions between cities. Many of them had to be estimated. And we knew that the conditions were sufficient to make a hierarchy arise, but are they necessary? So this is presented in a paper with Lena Sanders and so on. And this is the first demonstration was about recreating an urban hierarchy over a 2,000 years period with the corresponding increase in the inequalities in size as measured by the slope of the Zipf distribution. I don't develop the specificities of this multi-agent system, which is agent-based, but here the agents are cities, and what we try to reconstruct are the interactions between cities, and with rules that were obtained from the stylized facts we had observed in the statistical comparison of sets of cities. We have made several attempts at this type of modeling using different softwares, and the conditions for developing the models are very important because at the beginning, before 2010, we had from time to time, we succeed in hiring a PhD student in computer science with different laboratories and prominent computer scientists, colleagues, but they developed a model in different languages, and each was not usable again afterwards. And it is only when getting this ERC grant that we got, fortunately, not only enough enough financial amount for hiring a reasonable number of people working together, but at the same time, those people were interested in developing the OpenMOL platform for helping the development of models and their validation using the technologies of evolutionary algorithm and distributed computing. And this was really a step forward because we, with our former simulation models, we had demonstrated that in the general evolution of urban systems, we did not observe a regression towards a counter-urbanization, and this question has come to the floor again because of the COVID crisis and the dreams of going back to the countryside. But what is at stake in the real dynamics of urban system is the increasing differences in size and in economic capacity and so on among cities. So, and this trend towards more hierarchy is much larger than in a normal stochastic model. And we also had, involving a metropolization effect at the top of the hierarchy and a simplification from below of urban hierarchies. Shrinking cities are mostly small and medium-sized towns. But at the same time, we also demonstrated that the scale of one single territory was not large enough for understanding the development of the largest cities. And even in Europe, since the Middle Age, we have cities that we can identify as global cities. So in this exercise, when it was difficult to take into account a variety of factors, like in the case of former Soviet Union, which was analyzed by Clémentine Cotineau, you see here she made a simple comparison between what GBRA model would simulate as population in the blue compared to the observed one, which would mean the diagonal. And you see that a multi-agent system with spatial interactions between cities succeed much better in reconstructing the effective trajectories and final populations. And they, while calibrating this model on the observed data in former Soviet Union, they invented with Clémentine Cotineau and Chaperon, they invented a way of building progressively a multi-agent model by implementing successively processes of interactions that may be more or less sophisticated and complicated, and taking care of the environment, of the specific environment of the urban system, including location distances, demographic regions. In the former Soviet Union, you have very developed parts as Russia and less developed as Uzbekistan, for instance, location of boundaries and so on. And you also may experiment a variety of mechanisms. And then during those exercises, we also improved, thanks to the OpenMOL platform, a tool that is now operational for discussing your theoretical hypothesis in a model, showing you that if all what you have included in the model is not only sufficient to provide the urban hierarchy and reconstruct the urban trajectories, but also if it is necessary. And this is possible because we shifted from some 100 simulations in the classical applications of the first SimPOP model to 500 million simulations, exploring fully the space of parameters of a model with this technique of calibration profile that was invented by Romain Reuillon. The calibration profile for each parameter show you how you can compute the difference between observation and simulation, which is represented here on this y-axis, compared to all the variation domain of one single parameter, and the points represent simulations where all the other parameters of the model can take any value and vary independently. And so for each parameter, you see that you can find a minimum. So it is necessary to arrive to the expected result. But another parameter, this one, the duration of an innovation, for instance, was not necessary in the model. And then we had to revise our theory thanks to the results of the modeling. So to conclude, I think that what our group has until now rather interestingly documented is about different stages in the evolution of urban system. We have developed one rather simple model with not so many parameters, which is called SimPOP Local, for considering cities at the time of their emergence, 3,000 years after Neolithic time. They have invented the way to develop new resources through interactions with other cities, collecting resources from them and also testing the inventions they provide. But this development is very slow and very constrained by all types of possible events, natural catastrophes and conflicts with other territories. So it is very, very slow. But at the time of the Industrial Revolution, there is the development of a system of cities all over the world, which is still developing in some countries, found based on market economies with many network returns. And these systems seemed able to develop without any longer being submitted to the constraint of the physical environment. But of course, we know nowadays that this development is not sustainable because we have already consumed with our cities 3 times what our planet would offer if we wouldn't like to continue to try to equalize the conditions of living of all humans on the earth. But so we have now to imagine the evolution of our cities, of our so-called smart cities, under the climatic constraints, environmental transition constraint. And the good news is that there exists already this network of cities all over the world, which can both convey top-down the new regulations coming from international and national institutions, and bottom-up, this is very important, trying to adopt, to test, and to check and to adapt locally the initiatives that are coming from many, many small towns, medium-sized cities, and both with global cities that are showing off much more. So, thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Denise, for this very fascinating journey on this different models. I think it's that I have several questions myself, but there is one question from the outset from Rudy Fuchsling. Please, Rudy, unmute yourself and ask the questions.
So can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Oh, great. So first, I would like to thank you for this always very fascinating topic and brilliant talk. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I have a question because we are doing some very naive modelings together with an archaeologist, and we tried a very, very simple model, very naive. But however, we observed always the appearance of a certain type of frustration in the system. So in your studies, what do you think? Is the system sort of, let's say, yes, structured, but also sort of a frozen accident? To say it in other words, if the cities could move, would they? Or do you think that the system the system of these cities is already in a state quite close to what we could call an optimum?
Oh, I don't know if it is an optimum, but what we have observed is that cities have moved in the past. Some of them were destroyed and reconstructed not so far away, like if you think of Samarkand, for instance. But this no longer happened. I discussed with archaeologists probably after the 15th century. And then the trend all over the world is to try to keep with this accumulation already invested in the existing cities. So I think cities will not change location, or if they do, it will be very incremental. Thinking, for instance, of cities that are along coastlines, and with the rising ocean, they may build new neighborhoods inside the land instead of keeping so close of the sea. Did I correctly answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Probably I somewhat expressed myself not very properly, because I'm fully aware that cities don't move. My question was more towards to what extent the system, this connected system of cities is, let's say, the pure product, or let's say the product of history. But if you would sort of reshuffle, it would be, if it could reshuffle, being fully aware that it can't, but if it could, if it would take then another structure, because the actually existing structure is somewhat locked in but far from optimal.
So first thing I told you, I don't know what is an optimal. Because it is adaptive, and you don't know what your optimum, how to configure it, because I think the system of cities have proven that they were able to adapt, because they developed with huge changes in society, in economy, in technologies, and they kept comparable features over time.
I see.
While assimilating all those transformations in the society, in their landscape as well.
I see.
Of course, inside a system of cities, you have different trajectories, and you have relative change that are not the same. You have cities winning and losing cities according to the type of specializations they can have, according to their location in attractive regions or not, and so on. So you have a big diversity of evolutionary trajectories inside a single system of cities. I
see. Yeah, thank you very much. Brilliant answer. Thanks a lot.
Well, Denisa, in fact, I had a similar questions. Let me rephrase this, in my own way. So you said that this is really an adaptive network, but this adaptivity is somewhat reflections of the system which reacts to an external stimulus. And so this is the reactions is called a self-adapting network. But this must be sort of following some sort of optimization principle, in the sense that there must be some general guiding principle for the system to react. So certainly, I'm positively sure that there is some sort of underlying optimization principle which tends to be stationary. Of course, during the years, the external condition will change, and then the evolution will keep evolving because of this change in the boundary conditions. But I think this was Rudy had in mind. If we imagine that the system is in a frozen boundary condition, so the historical setup and everything is fixed, then the system certainly will eventually reach a steady state in which the system will no longer change. And this driving force is certainly an optimization principle. So there should be some way of extracting this. So I was wondering whether you have some comments on that.
I think it's partly a question of vocabulary, because optimization principle is both a term that is defined in social sciences. For instance, you can optimize the equilibrium between cost and benefits in an economic model, for instance. You can, and you can adjust a configuration to the aim you are following, trying to find the optimum. But I would say that if you reason still in social sciences and observe the system of cities, you have no who defines this optimum? Who controls this optimum that would be represented by the existing urban hierarchy? Nobody. There is no institution behind. There is no interest to keep. You see what I mean? So an optimum corresponds to an intention of doing things in the best possible way. Whereas when you look at this constant evolution, adaptative evolution of systems, of urban systems, you cannot consider that someone is driving someone, individual or institution or whatever, is controlling the evolution in a specific direction. Mm-hmm. So the result, this persistency, which it is a kind of dynamic equilibrium, if you like, because of the incremental adjustments of cities that are imitating each other to transform and to get the best of the modernity. But I don't see there is nothing converging towards an optimum.
I understand, but let me give you an example. Just to rationalize what I have in mind. Think about airlines. So airlines, of course, if you look at the airlines,
yes,
there is a network, and this network certainly has reached some sort of steady state at the present time, which is the result of minimizations of the cost, for example, on one side, and the optimization of the efficiency of the whole system. And no one is controlling, there is no external input that is controlling, is self-adapting because of this sort of optimization principle. So I was, the idea is that, maybe there is something like that also in this case.
But yes, this is a good example, the airline system, because you have, in that case, measurable cost. You have competition. It is a market competition between companies, and they change over time their organization. For instance, when defining hubs, the system in hub and spoke well, did not exist at the beginning, and it was invented for minimizing cost in a specific kind of organization with private companies and airports and all kind of interactions. But it is rather easy to and intentional to minimize the functioning cost of that system. And its special organization is likely to change if the rules and the engines of air transportation change in the next decade. So I don't see something equivalent in the case of cities.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I'm taking the privilege of being the
Thank you for the question. Anyway, it makes me think I will think it's over.
If there is anyone else that would like to ask questions, I don't want to monopolize the. I don't see. Please unmute yourself if you have questions and ask the question.
So can I talk just a second? I like to go back to these comments about optimization, and I think that in a way I agree with Denise. For what I see, I work for a long time on optimization, and let's say that I don't see you should see which is the optimum. For what I see in this process, it is an evolving activity, an evolving process that go probably in the direction of the optimum, but we don't know what it is. The optimum. It can be the optimum, or it can be that is not the optimum. For what I understand is it is something that we believe it is an improvement. Let's say if we want to talk about optimization, but it can be that it's not an improvement. I don't see the optimum in this structure, I must say. But I want to make a question to give a question to Denise. That is how if she believes there will be any change in this evolution of this system, of this structure of cities because of the coronavirus. Do you think that this, with the change that we are living in terms of our kind of work, our way to interact, our way to move, to live, this will produce some form of change in this structure, or you think it is just let's hope, a very short, event that will have a very short effect in the system?
Thank you, Irene, for this very good and interesting question, and often asked in those times. Actually, I think that hopefully the destructions created by these pandemics will not be generalized and wide and deep and enough to change the special organization of our world. Many persons have dreamed of living differently, no longer in large cities, no longer using the metro system and commuting and imagining themselves in a house in the countryside. And indeed, at the margins, we have observed a few people moving or converting their secondary residence into the principal one, but it remains marginal. And as soon as the constraints that are raised because of the pandemics are released, you see that business as usual is again there, not so much through traveling, but interactions in cities, in bars, restaurants, universities, and so on, are indeed responsible for the new developments of the pandemics. And so there is I think a strong trend for individuals, for firms, to try to reconstruct the former conditions after a very big and disruptive event. And I can say, though, I don't want to make bad comparisons, but the only time in the history of city where you can see that large cities lose population, whereas small and medium size get more, it is between the big war times. And then people try to find resources elsewhere, go back to families, regions, and so on. But just after the war, you see very quickly cities recovering their rank in the urban hierarchy they had before. And this is true also after the big pandemic that happened in the 14th century, dividing by a factor 2 the population in Europe. You have a 0.8 correlation coefficient between the population of cities in 1350 and in 1450, 1 century after. The cities have regained a position which is similar in the urban hierarchy to the rank they had 1 century before. Because step by step, the former interactions are reconstructed once the catastrophe is over. So I think nowadays we have so many more connections. We think that we have more freedom in the pattern of our interactions, but perhaps we don't have such a large freedom. We only have, what we have is a much higher number and diversity of interactions, but the pattern of our interactions is not changing so quickly and so easily, even after a catastrophe.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Irene?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you for your support about the question of optimum. I will ask you more about this question of optimization. Yeah.
I think this is a fascinating topic, so we could go on for a long time. So maybe maybe next time. So I don't see other questions from the chat. So if not, please join me to thank again Denise for this beautiful, fascinating talk, and I will do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Irene.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And see you hopefully soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.